Ladies and gentlemen, you're welcome back to the Tribal Root Studio. It's been really a long time since we have been here, and today we are back in studios. Tribal Root Studio is located in Ishaka at the foothills of the mountains of the moon in Uganda. And yes, every time we come in the studio, we are inspiring you, we are helping you, and we are also trying to learn from you, to connect with the rest of the people worldwide that are trying to make a change in our societies. My name again is Alina Zahil. I'm so happy to be speaking to you once again. And today in studio, we have our very own Derrick Barasa, and he is back to talk to us. You know, all the time Derrick has been here. He's been talking politics, he's been talking geopolitics generally, and today we are opening this session with Kenya. A lot has been happening lately about Kenya's elections. I think I would say they have had the most successful transition of power from one leader to the next. So Derrick, I would like to welcome you first of all to this show. This is the Tribal Studio once again, and I would like you to take us without wasting time directly to what transpired in Kenya.
Ladies and gentlemen, thank you so much. Alina, for this. Once more, my name is Derrick, and it was a pleasure to come back to the show every other time. Now, Kenya, and I mean to pragmatically predispose my statements to the reality that just happened in the last days. Kenya has provided a conceptual understanding for many things about the African identity of politics and the democratic instruction of our leaders on the continent. Fast forward, we know Kenya just comes from an election on the 9th of August, 2022. Yes. Surprisingly, this is September, and so we protracted a whole month of political mambo jumbo just to get a president sworn in. A very rigorous process, a lot of twists and turns, but finally, democracy is served. I mean, every single tenet of legislation, judicial process, and executive orders have been tested in the Kenyan election. Now, of course, we might be interested in knowing that how important is this anyway. I mean, going forward, we have to understand that Kenya is not only going to represent Africa on the round table of democracy on the international scene, but also is going to be a perfect yardstick for neighboring countries, because as many subscribers have said, that Kenya is an island of democracy in a large ocean of dictatorships.
Wow. So saying Kenya is an island of democracy in a large ocean of dictatorships, that's a strong statement.
Yes.
What is Kenya doing differently? Because I know that Kenya has really had a transition of power from one president to the next. It hasn't had those coups historically, like we have seen in my own nation, Uganda. I think before Museveni came to power in 1986, every other government had to come in by force or by the gun, power of the gun, unlike Kenya. So it really doesn't look like this democracy in Kenya is as young as many of us would like to say. It has been there in small portions, and I think it is growing. What do you have to say about that?
Well, it's a very interesting situation that Kenya announces. Kenya, for a fact, is that country that has always had election violence, but not in a transition of power. Now, I don't know, I would invite scholars to study that and how it happens. But I mean, how do you describe that? President Jomo Kenyatta, Livingstone Kamau, as he was popularly, as was his name, transferred power peacefully to Daniel Moi, Sorotich.
Yeah.
Daniel Moi, though contested so many times, we saw there was an attempted coup in 1982 that didn't succeed. In 1991, the introduction of multi-party politics and a lot of resistance. Still, he peacefully hands over power to Mwai Kibaki. Mwai Kibaki was up to 2013 and also peacefully hands over power to Muigai Kenyatta. I mean, the question is, I mean, in recent time, Mwai Kibaki faced a lot of contestations, particularly in the year that we all remember, 2007, 2008. But still, it did not tumble over his power. He remained in power.
Yes.
President Uhuru Kenyatta, who is the current predecessor to the current president, William Ruto, had a lot of contestation in 2017. We even saw the first nullification of an election on the continent in 2017. I mean, so that announces something that is so very dogmatic, I should say. Something seems to be particular about the Kenyan case study that may not be relevant in other settings. Now, many people, of course, will juxtapose that maybe the tribalistic situation, the ethnic, racial, or rather religious or whatever divides in the country might be influencing. And at one point, I'm also tempted to think so. I mean, because, just a brief insight. In 2013, if you look at the voter numbers, I mean, how different ethnic blocks were able to vote for their candidate. 90% of the Jaluo tribe, or the Jaluo tribe is on the eastern shores of the Lake Victoria, voted for Raila Amolo Odinga. 90%. I mean, that's something you might not dispute. Okay, let's say, anyway, he was one of their own. But if you look relatively to other jurisdictions in the region, for example, in Uganda, with Bobby Wine in the current recent election of 2021, there was no much closeness of such a vote to Bobby Wine. I doubt if Bobby Wine could even get above 70% in Buganda. Looking at other tribes, I mean, the Kalenjin tribe in Kenya, 90% of the Kalenjins voted for the Uhuru government, where Ruto was a member at that point. I mean, that shows you that there is a rightful inclination of tribal heads, kingpins, insular tribal politics in the democratic manifestations of Kenya. That you cannot displace. So, in as much as people might be seeing Kenya flourish under the new reign of democracy and whatever, it is important to know the deep-seated insular tribal politics that are nestled in the Kenyan democracy. So, going forward, Kenya, I believe, has turned around from a situation that was so tumultuous, I mean, one that was on the brink of rebellion, anarchy, instability, to one that is current right now. I don't know if you might want to know about that, but if you remember, just briefly, in 2017, after the nullification of the first election on the 8th of August 2017, presidential candidate Raila Amolo Odinga actually threatened to divide the nation of Kenya into two. I mean, there was one that was more in the eastern part and another that was southern based and more on the shores of Lake Victoria. How does such a country in 5 years, turn around from that situation to one that announces unity, posterity, and offers a perfect example for the rest of the continent?
Thank you so much, Derrick, Dr. Derrick Barasa, for that kind of scrutiny, I would say. That's really powerful to see. A lot of people have questions. President Ruto, the current president of Kenya, and Raila, the opponent, then they really had a tight race.
Yeah.
And I also saw that I don't think so many people saw this coming. Because of the tightness of the race, these people were like heel on heel, and anyone could come out a leader, anyone could come out a winner. So what do you think Kenyans have to say about that kind of tightness? Are these people in the opposition really satisfied? And do you think that people that were challenging the win have any valid reasons? Or what do you think?
Well, like we were discussing earlier today, I need to just reiterate it in the show. I mean, from Aristotle and a little Platonic laws, the basic tenets of democracy are two: participation and contestation. I do believe that people should be I'm subjected to question the numbers of those who will be the majority and the minority. And in that case, the majority should be able to have their way and the minority should be able to have their say in any democracy. So in this case here, what we see in Kenya is that despite a cleavage in the bond that was between the president and the then deputy president, one that was protracted into a cat and mouse game, it did not involve any mud smearing, any what you'd expect in most of other so-called banana republics on the continent. I mean, we saw one gentleman tussle, one that did not involve state apparatus, did not involve anything that would necessitate or provoke violence or in any case. So big kudos to those two candidates at the top. But breaking away from that, we also need to discover one thing, that there has been provided an alternative method of politics in the Kenyan setup. We have seen a drift. And perhaps this is why Kenya is actually where it is right now. From the politics of hegemony and people politics, and we're talking about each other, bastardizing your souls or witch hunts and all that mudslinging, to one that is based on issues. I mean, issues-based politics, like they say. Economics, I mean, offering real solutions. We're living in a time whereby we're just coming from the backdrop of a pandemic that went economic.
Yes.
We are also coming from a time when Russia, we're still in Russia-Ukraine crisis and everything that has actually shoved so many economies and flushed them down the drain. So it was necessary for a country like Kenya to have meaningful economic discussions. And we have to credit these two political leaders that despite all the provocations, all the intentions that of naysayers or anything that the politics would go personal, ethnic or demagoguery, they still held up to the debate and tussled it out. So that actually birthed what people have termed as the hustlers against the dynasties.
There seemed to be a quick acceptance from the other side of the loser. When President Ruto was announced as the winner by Chebukati, I was watching and following the responses from the opposition, and to me it did not look like these people in opposition are really like out there opposing the win. Most of them were like, maybe that's what it was supposed to be, we move on. I actually met a lot of Kenyans on social media that were saying, we move on. That kind of maturity, we haven't had it in my country, we haven't had it in other countries in East Africa. Like, I would really love to know what is that has made the Kenyans to have that kind of growth.
Well, interestingly, I feel to characterize the opposition in Kenya, and like other countries in the region, like you seem to allude, I want to state that the opposition in Kenya seems to be more bent to opposing policy than opposing person.
Wow.
You get opposition in Kenya, I think, has found its rightful abstract meaning in Kenya as compared to other places. Look at this.
We are talking about Kenya's opposition looking more mature than opposition elsewhere in East Africa. I remember I've seen most of my friends, when they announced that Ruto has won, most of them were accepting and everyone was saying, Kenya will move on. So it really tells so much about a Kenyan citizen being so much ready to accept change when it knocks on the door. Unlike other areas.
Very. Like I've said before, the opposition in Kenya is not just an opposition of people. And that's another statement to mean enmity. It is actually an opposition of ideas. I mean, trajectory of ideas, then they compete against each other. So for the ordinary people down, on the backdrop of the economic pandemic caused by COVID and the Ukraine-Russia war, what they're interested in is who provides better alternatives for the economy. And of course that now has led us to the point whereby both candidates had to come up with meaningful manifestos channel them down to the common man down, and let them compete. We have the hustlers versus the dynasties, like they've been termed.
Wow.
Ruto proclaiming himself as a rags to riches, chicken seller to president kind of person, and the other preferring to keep silent on that discourse. So the common man on the ground gets to see that either way, whatever wins, there is nothing much at stake. All that has happened is a competition of ideas, and whoever wins, it will just be a different idea. Not that one has lost or the other is going to.
So Kenyans still move on. I see that is a very very special way to perceive people, knowing that these people are really objective, because they really care about their lives, they care about their circumstances, and they want someone who will uplift them regardless. And actually there is where I would say that tribalism may be playing a big role in Kenya's politics, but at the same time it doesn't look like they are making it central. Because if you're talking about policy and ideas, it then seems like these people are about having a better Kenya, not about persons like most countries in East Africa.
Well, you have to understand that it's actually not nice and unpleasant to compare the Kenyan political stratosphere, given the past in Kenya, with that in the other countries. Kenya has gone through a lot of gravitating, harsh context situations that I think many other countries in the region have not faced.
Really?
Yes, I would say so, in the recent past. Because now when you look Kenya from 2007, over close to 800,000 people died just in recent time. Then they learn from the mistakes. It influences the Katiba Mpya or the 2010 new constitutional amendment choice, and the new constitution is set into motion. Then after that, in 2013, when Raila Odinga actually went to court and was later pulled out of court, hoping to just calm down the nation so that they would not go back to what happened in 2007. That shows us that there is this kind of need to forget and move on, build the country. I mean, that's something that has not happened.
The memories are still fresh, I think.
Memories are still fresh.
Yeah.
And somebody might say, okay, that's what happened also in Rwanda, that's where the movie was, that's maybe what happened in many other countries that have had that past. Yeah, so that is very, very important. But also understanding the issue of winner takes it all politics in other countries, I think would create also a very huge contrast. And look at the case of Uganda, whereby if you are in government, you are winner of everything. And if you are in opposition, you are loser of everything. That kind of situation has, I think, created a very big comparative difference between the two countries. In Kenya, I am made to believe that, like in the recent government, when Raila Odinga lost the election in 2018, he did lose it all. He still found his place in government. Okay? So there is this kind of feeling that it doesn't really matter who wins.
I understand. Like we would love to see. I think it's not last month when President Museveni appointed one of the opposition leaders, Norbert Mao, and the opposition came up in arms against Mao. You are a mole. You've betrayed the opposition. And when you think about it, you see that people have really believed, and they have a mentality that if you're opposition, you should not work in government. You should not get appointed to any government position. If that's what it should be, then it means that the opposition are not involved in building the nation. And I would really think that building the nation takes
everyone.
It takes two to tango.
Yeah, very true. And I have never seen a country that developed with 25% or 50% of their population feeling not part of the development agenda.
And it creates, I think, a polarized situation. Where you would want to see opposition and the people in power agreeing on some things to do with policy of the nation.
Exactly.
Because at the end of the day, these leadership struggles remain leadership struggles, but then they are common interests of the common man.
Yeah.
So we really have a lot to admire about Kenya, and even thinking like even the common person has this kind of mindset where they know that the nation comes before anyone.
Exactly.
So talking about that, our president, President Yoweri Museveni, was in Kenya at the inauguration, and he echoed the East African agenda, the federation and the unity. What do Kenyans think about that?
First of all, before I go to that question, I wanted to add to what you were saying. I believe at the end of the day, there are no bad roads for Kikuyus that are not for the Jaluos.
Yeah.
There are no bad hospitals for the Luyas that are not for the Somali. There is no lack of water for the Akamba that is not for the Maasai. So I do believe that Kenyans have understood that so early, and they've moved on from those cheap, petty politicking strategies to one that recognizes real concepts, those that are built around what.
And that reminds me. It reminds me also, because you mentioned something. You said these two people presented manifesto, and the people were voting the ideas. And I've remembered that I have seen in Ugandan's politics, the manifestos are not even read. I mean, people don't even listen to you.
That's the joke.
It really doesn't really matter what you're saying or how nice it sounds. People are voting people. They're voting the people projects. And from the lowest levels to the highest.
And it's so embedded intrinsically, it's so insular in the Ugandan population that it has come to a point where it is either the angel Bobi Wine or angel Museveni, and the devil Bobi Wine or the devil Museveni. So you get to lose the whole fact of dialogue, of discussion, of debates, of discourse. I mean, sharing and contrasting opinion.
Yes.
These are things that I feel are very alien to the Ugandan population in recent time. And I think Ugandans, Tanzanians, many other blocks in the region really need to understand that earlier and sooner. Well, going forward, you also do realize that this does not stop here. The Kenyan GDP per capita for a single person is $400. In Uganda, it's about $180. In Rwanda, it's about $118. So meaning Kenya is about, per capita of a Kenyan individual is about a combination of both a Rwandan and a Ugandan. I mean, so these things do not stop here. The way you vote, the way you think after the vote, and what everything else trickles down to how much you're going to consume and how much you're going to spend. Now, this of course comes through many, a lot of backlash about Kenya could have done better and what. So that I can actually tell you, Alena, that that figure 400 could actually be better if it wasn't for Kenyans having the biggest wage expenditure in the region and all that kind of stuff. So you realize that the thinking, the modus operandi of politics in Kenya has had a trickle-down effect onto the way that people live. And I think this is something that Ugandans would also love.
Okay. There's a lot to admire about Kenya.